Hi everybody, so this is my aunt's documentation board. Unfortunately, I didn't have children to actually do these activities with, so that kind of sucked, or I would have had like a lot more photos and more documentation in it, but this is what I got. So let's go ahead. Right here is my curriculum wheel and my anti-bias wheel. For social circle, my I wonder question is, I wonder where we can find ants. For the beginning of our social circle, I would invite the children to the area and take a seat in our social circle carpet. I will ask the I wonder question, I wonder where we could find ants. The children will share their ideas and answers. They might say things like, I see them in my house, or I see them at the park. After the children make connections through sharing their thoughts, I will introduce the book Ant Cities. This book is great because there's a lot of new vocabulary that helps the children get a better understanding of ants and their habitats. Some of those new vocabulary words might be like nests, tunnels, harvester ants, worker ants, queen ants, larvae, pupae, and mandible. When we conclude the story, I will tell them I have something for us to observe and explore and bring out an ant farm. Or ask the children to what they think we're going to do with the ant farm. I'll encourage children to share their thoughts with one another about the ants and the ant farm. Ask to come up one by one and observe the ant farm with a magnifying glass. I wonder what ants do every day, I'll ask them. I'll put the ant farm up, but still in view, and start talking about our next activity. So here is some things that the book might would have told them. So like vocabulary is like the nursery of like the eggs and the larva and the pupa, and then an ant hill and a colony, tunnels, and maybe even like their storage room and how they transport everything. Next would be science. I wonder how we will use these materials to make a sustainable habitat for our live ants. So for this one, children will get to make their own ant farm. So I would introduce the activity by explaining to them, today we're making our own classroom ant habitat. I have the materials and supplies on the table for us to make our habitats. I wonder how you will use the materials to make a sustainable habitat for our ants. On the tables, each group of 2 will have materials to make their ant farm. Sand, water, tank, food packet, and live ants. I will ask them which material should we add first to the tank. Some might say the sand should go first, or we should mix the sand and water first, then add it to the tank. And whatever method they believe would work is what they will do to make the ant farm. So anything's accepted. After the sand and water are both in the tank, we will add the ants. But first, we have to put the ants into a refrigerator for 60 seconds. This slows the ants down so they don't climb out of the tank when we add them in. Once the children add them in, we will shut the tank and put the tank in a dark area for 1 hour. During that hour, they are going to settle into their new home, and we will play outside until they're ready for us to observe and look at. And we'll have a magnifying glass so that each child could watch the ants' movements. Next is language. And my I wonder question is, I wonder how we could set up the board to resemble our story in ant habitat. This activity will be set up after we read the book Ants Go Marching One by One. We'll move to the tabletops where each child will have a tray full of props to create a storyboard where the children will reenact the book we just read. I will ask the children, I wonder how we can set up the board to resemble our story in ant habitat. Each child will have fake grass, sand, hay, plastic trees, bushes, rocks, borders, caves, bridges, and plastic ants to contribute to the board. And those would be kind of like the props in these, and how these children are having like a little hedge where the ants could go through, and each child will have like a little plastic ant that it could be like their character. After they set up the board, we'll go ahead and act like one of the characters in the story. and they could either reenact the story exactly, or they could add onto and create their own story. Some questions I will ask is, I wonder where you will place the trees and bushes. How can you make it look like the story? What will happen next in your story? The activity will be complete once the story ends and there is no more story to reenact. I will ask the children to reflect on the story. I will ask them what they made up and added to the story that wasn't in the story before. I'll ask them what was the same and different. Next is art. I wonder how we can make our papers look like a portrait of ants' habitat. Each children will have blank printer paper, but before I pass out the papers, I prepare each paper with invisible ants using white crayon. I will provide a dropper and food coloring for the child to use in their art. They have the ability to choose any color they would like. I would ask the children, I wonder how we can make our papers look like a portrait of ants' habitat using the materials. Some might say, I'll use green for grass or the blue for sky. Maybe they might even want to use their fingers. As the children start to drop the food coloring onto the paper, and ants will begin to appear. The children will be excited to see the appearing ants and say, oh look, there are ants in my paper. I'll ask more questions like, I wonder where the ants will appear on your color art. How many drops will you need? As the children continue to explore their art, I'll ask them if they can identify parts of the ant. If not, I will assist them by pointing and saying, there's the antennas, heads, leg, abdomen, and thorax. When the children are finished, I will ask them to individually tell me about their work and what did they find in their art. What colors did they decide to use? As I conclude the activity by following up on their work, they will next carefully carry their artwork onto the drying rack. And then lastly, it's going to be math. I wonder how you will create ants to resemble the size and number of your family members. I will introduce this activity by saying we know so much about ants in their colony. We have to talk about how they are like, we will talk about how they are like family. Let's make our own ant family today and represent our own family at home. Let's make the ant's body, shape, and parts with Play-Doh. On each tray there will be skin-like color of dough and tools to create their own ant family. Children will critically count how many people are in their family and decide how many ants they're going to create and include in their ant Play-Doh. Some children might use eggs, larvae, or pupae to resemble younger siblings or themselves. Some ways I will add on to the work is talking to the children about the body parts, and we can count 6 legs, 2 antennas, 2 eyes, 3 core body parts to help them create their own model. I will ask them how many they made so far and how many more they need to make in order to create their family. At the end of the activity, they will be able to visually see how many are in their family and will be able to count their ants. They will have the chance to use words like more, less, or the same when they compare and contrast their family structures to other children in their classroom. And then over here, I just added some quotes that I think the children would have said. So things like, ants are so strong, like me and my dad. Where do ants live? Is there a king ant? Ant colonies. Their ants have colonies like how I have family. And why do they build tunnels? And of course, I would be prepared to answer any of those questions or, make comments back, give feedback. So yeah, this is my board.